What's up? Welcome back to part 2 of this tutorial. If you haven't seen part 1, please go back. I explain the groundwork. But I'm going to switch it up a little bit today. I introduce you to VirtualMIDI. I'm going to give you some time to play around with that, and we're going to bring it back to Ableton. Today's going to be all about setting up audio and audio routing, how to set up your channels to give you the most flexibility depending on what your setup is. I'm not here to tell you exactly how to set up your show. You could be an electronic musician with no live instruments. You could be a big band with like 12 people and you have some crazy switchboard or something. Like, whatever you want to do, I want to give you the framework to plug in your own ideas and all of the ways that you would have to set that up to give you the most control of that. That being said, if you don't plan on using live instruments and stuff, some of this might seem kind of needless, but I think it's really good stuff to know. So stick with me through this part, even if it's not relevant to you. I promise it will all come together in a big package that you will be glad that you understand. So I'm making the assumption that you have the gear to do this, which means a laptop. If you want to perform out live, you're going to need an audio interface that is relatively low latency. If you can get it down to like 10 to 15 milliseconds round trip, you should be good for most things. But for live instrumentation, anything more than that is going to start becoming an issue. And I'm assuming you have at least 4 audio outputs on your interface if you want to do this the right way and do any sort of routing with effects or, when you start going to bigger stages, sound guys are going to start hating you if you aren't splitting up your signal and doing this the right way. So I'm making those assumptions in today's lesson, but obviously you can still follow along if you don't have that stuff. This is good information to have regardless. So we're going to go into Ableton. This is kind of where we left off yesterday. We have a channel for communicating data to VirtualMIDI, and I've got a little track section. I replaced the 4/4 kick drum with an actual song. My audio interface doesn't work while I'm streaming, so you can't hear it. But there's a little song here I've split into 2 parts. The first thing I want to go over is I'm assuming that you have a basic understanding of Ableton and you understand the grid system here. So when you play a scene, the clip plays here. When you play another scene, that clip will play here. The cool thing that took me a minute to figure out was how to automatically switch between scenes, because imagine that you have a big show. There's a lot of reasons you might want to do this, to switch between parts in a song, to automatically trigger different things. Going over to your laptop every few minutes when you're trying to play an instrument and go back to like trigger the next song totally kills the vibe. So I'm going to show you how to automatically trigger another scene that follows the first one. So I'm just going to call this Midi. So here's the deal. In Mac, there is a Midi routing technique that you can use called IAC Driver. It's like a little virtual MIDI port. And as you can see, mine has an IAC driver. It's bus 1. The way you're going to set that up on Mac is audio MIDI setup. If you search and type in audio MIDI setup, should come up. It's in your settings somewhere. This MIDI Studio right here is going to have the options you need. If you don't see IAC driver, figure out how to get that to show up. It should be somewhere in these options. You can Google that. That's a whole separate tutorial I don't want to dive into. Similar to the way that OSC Send kind of routes data around in your computer, IAC Driver lets you do that with Midi. So you have another channel here, and you want to make sure your Midi to IAC Driver is going in. So now this Midi channel can send Midi data, which you can make, that can now go anywhere. You could also route this into VirtualMIDI if you wanted to use Midi to control things. The only problem that I have with that is there's only, the way that Midi works underneath the hood, I'm about to school you a little bit. There's only 127 steps that Midi can land on. So when you use it to control something that you want to be smooth, it'll go like this. It'll like start to like, it looks like shit if you're doing something visually. It's usually fine for sound, which is why we use it for music. But we're just going to be using this to create a little note somewhere. And you can use literally any note. Let me move my head out of the way so you can see this. I'm not going to make this loop. So that's the first thing. You probably don't want this to loop in this situation where I'm going to be triggering a scene. But you could just go in here and create a little note. And I'm going to make this a little bit longer, just for the effect, so you can kind of see what it's doing. But the idea is, I made this note here. And when you play this clip, it will go along, and eventually it will trigger that note, and it's sending it to your IAC driver, which is then living in some imaginary space on your computer, and other programs can read that MIDI data, including Ableton itself. Now you might think this is kind of weird. Why can't we just send information within Ableton to Ableton? And it is weird. Ableton's stupid like that. But this is a workaround that will allow you complete control of any parameter in Ableton. When I do this, the song will start playing, and over here this MIDI clip is now running with the song, and when we get to measure 5 here, it sends a MIDI signal. And now what I can do in Ableton is I can hit Command M, or I think it's up here, you can hit MIDI in the corner up here. And this basically highlights in blue anything that you could link a MIDI command to. So when I hit play, you're going to see I'm going to select this second scene here. This is what I want to get triggered by this MIDI information. When I hit play, so I'm going to highlight this, and you'll see when it gets to that point, boom, that little thing just got D#2, I think is the note that I'm triggering. It's just a random note. You can make it whatever you want. So now, this scene right here, I'm going to call it scene 2. It's going to be scene 1. When I click this, it's all synced up with this. And when it gets to this note, look at scene 2. It gets triggered. And now we're playing the second audio clip. And hopefully you're understanding the power of this is now you can automatically have that trigger another OSC clip. You could have that trigger another MIDI clip. And now you've got all these synchronized things triggered automatically going together. Now this gets really powerful as we move forward into live audio and automating live audio effects. I used to be in a band that was a live band, and I had a bunch of pedals and stuff, and we would play staring at our frickin' feet. It was like a shoegaze thing. I loved playing with audio effects, but it was the most boring show anyone has ever seen because you're just staring at your feet. Nobody wants to go see that show. Audio effects are really cool, and you can do a lot of really cool stuff with them. But I personally believe you can automate most of that stuff, and you can spend your time engaging with the crowd, hyping people up, having a good time, instead of noodling with the knobs and pedals and whatnot. I know a lot of audio guys out there are cringing at me saying this, but if you can automate something, and sometimes that's a really cool performance, seeing someone do all this stuff. That's its own thing. But if you don't want to do that, there's another way. I'm going to show you how to automate live effects on live audio inputs, how to route that in a way that doesn't cause chaos for a sound guy when you go to a music venue. So even if this isn't relevant to you and you're an electronic musician, bear with me. You can see the kind of, it's starting to evolve. We've got a third track. We're going to add a fourth one. Now, to get audio into Ableton, normally you would create an audio track. We're not going to do that because, as you can see here, the only clips that you can put in an audio track are other audio clips. I can only copy and paste this audio clip here. Over here, I can create new MIDI clips. Like, that's really convenient. I can control data that way. So instead, we're going to create a MIDI track, but we want audio to go through it. So we're going to take an external audio effect, drag it onto our MIDI clip. And now we're getting audio in a MIDI clip. If you're familiar with Ableton, but you're not super advanced in it, this might make no sense to you. Like, why is he doing this? Just bear with me. You can create audio from whatever audio input you want. Let's say you have an interface, you have a microphone plugged in. You can select that input, and now you'll be getting audio into this MIDI track. I'm going to name this mic input because I'm going to assume that that's going to be a microphone. Hopefully you're still with me. Created a MIDI track that has audio input. I'm going to create a return track. I'm going to call this microphone output. That's what I'm going to call it. We're going to make this white. The idea is instead of sending everything to the master and then just handing a sound guy a cable that has everything, this would allow you to control multiple outputs. So when you go to a venue, you can do things properly and give the sound guy the control he needs to prevent microphone feedback, to prevent just really awful sounding mixes when you go to a live venue. So you can go and create another one for track output. We've got track, the track audio is routing to the track output, as you can see, and the mic input would be routing to the mic input would be routing to A, which is the mic output here. And we've routed these to external outputs instead of a master bus. That was a lot. We've got MIDI data, which is controlling our scenes. We've got OSC data, which is talking to VDMX that we covered in the last lesson. We've got a backing track, which is playing audio. And we've got a microphone input, which if you're a DJ, that could be your hype thing. If you're a singer or you're in a band, that could be your vocals. And that's routing to its own separate output. Hopefully this all makes sense. We're going to take this a little bit farther, and I'm going to cover effects. So because I can't have my interface plugged in at the same time as my camera, we're just going to stream the computer right now, so I can demonstrate this a little bit better. We're going to get into audio effects here, and you've got your mic input right here. You would think like, oh, I just want some effects, just fucking throw them on here. When we got this crazy reverb here, and now it's on my mic input. But we don't want that because now it's mixed in on your mic output, and when you go to a venue and you were to give the sound guy your mic output, it would have reverb on it. And if he turned the volume up or down on that, it would be mixed in with the reverb. He can't control that. Next thing you know, there's feedback and everything. You know, the audience hates you, sound guy hates you. Your life just starts spiraling downward. So we're going to save you from all that pain and suffering by putting this reverb in a return track. You're going to make this look like that. And you're going to turn the wet dry all the way up. And what that basically allows you to do is treat this reverb a little separately. And you can route this into your reverb. But right now it's also going into your master, and you don't really want that. So what we're going to do is make an effects bus. And you're going to route the reverb into an effects bus and just send this to whichever external out you happen to want. So when I route this to reverb, it's going separately. You probably won't hear it because you're only getting audio 1 and 2. But the idea is now you can see the mic inputs going into the reverb. And if you were to hear this, if I mute these and I just show you this, you're going to hear only reverb because that's what's coming through. So that's what that channel's doing. I hope that demonstrates that effectively. But as you start to expand this, let's say you really like this one delay plugin. You want to add a delay. So you want to make sure you send this only to the effects bus. And now you can send it to this delay here, which we're just going to link. So we got a wow. Sounds crazy. But now you have separate control over that. You can do things like, you know, put a filter on it so you don't get all of that gross low end in there. Sounds nice and clean in your mix. You could do things like sidechain. You could sidechain with your vocal to make it so that sticks out nice and clear at the venue. You could do all sorts of great stuff on your effects bus now. And it gets really powerful when you start adding more than one live instrument, more than one, you know, let's say you wanted to play some samples or something here. You know, you could route these all to the same reverb, the same delay, and it's not going to take a ton of CPU power because you only have one instance of it. And it allows you to route it separately so that sound guys don't hate you and you have more control over everything that's going on. Does that make sense? Do you understand why I'm doing this? And like, most of the time you're not going to want to mess with these. And the reason we want to do things this way, with this mic input being a MIDI channel, is because now you see your reverb and delay, which is on the bus that is going to this reverb over here. You can now take this and see how down here you have an automation clip. And I can make it so that the reverb, as the song plays, the reverb can fade in, or I can get rid of it. I can go like no reverb. Or I can be like, okay, this is the talking part. And then as soon as that comes in, late to work, I got reverb on my voice. That was a really pitchy note there. You got to witness. But you see how I can automate the effects in this part. And because I'm clicking this, when the scene gets triggered, I'm hitting all of them together. You're getting the signal that's going to be going to VMX that synchronizes with your track. And you're going to be getting the effects control. It's controlling these sends down here that is all synchronized with your music. So now you can have an entire automation sequence of effects turning on and off depending on what part of the song you want it to go. So you can be like, okay, measure 5, the bass comes in, measure 21, the chorus hits. And I can go like measure 5, have this come in, blah, blah, blah. You know, have it turn off here, to have the reverb turn down there. You can control every little aspect at every little part, and it's all synchronized together. And it lets you do an insane amount of control over everything that's going on. It's very clean. So hopefully this makes sense why I'm doing things this way, and you're starting to see the potential of how this could be expanded and how you can adapt it for your project. Think about what you want to do, what sort of control you want. If you want to have, you know, if you're a keyboard player and you want to put some samples here, or maybe, you know, play an instrument, you could route that to its own output, you know, route it to its own output, and then have it automate the effects on those things, or automate different presets on here. You can control all of that with this type of setup, and it synchronizes everything together with the track, with the lights, with the automation that will trigger the next song, all that sort of stuff. So hopefully you're starting to see the power of this setup and how it comes together. Tomorrow, I'll bring back VDMX and we'll start building on this and making something really cool. And I'll show you how to organize things on VDMX properly. But I just wanted to go through the audio and show you the system and how it can really be really flexible for all sorts of different stages, all sorts of different setups. And hopefully you find this useful. So I will talk to you tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. Peace out, guys.